Spilling. Such shaky hands. Is it totally wrong that I'm drinking vodka out of a Jameson's glass? I mean, you all know that I love my Jamesons. But somehow Jameson's with Veronica just doesn't quite have the same ring to it. Okay, so this week's episode, because we're coming up on the end of the month, I would do an entire episode dedicated to Robert Burns. Robbie Burns, Robbie Burns. His close friends like to call him Bobby. I'm sure that's not true. I'm sure Bobby wasn't even a thing in 1770, whatever he was. Regardless, January 25th of every year is something those of us in the Scottish community celebrate as Robbie Burns Day. There's a big celebration. There's lots of drinking and haggis and whiskey and dancing and tartan and all kinds of stuff. So I thought that for any of you who don't know what that is or have never heard of it before or are maybe going to your very first Burns night, I thought I would give you a little background. I'm sure you're probably wondering, who's this Burns guy? What's his story? He was born on the 25th of January, so this whole 25th of January thing is to celebrate his birthday. He was born on the 25th of January in 1759, which was quite some time ago. He wasn't a rich man. He grew up on a farm. When his father died, he had no money. He left the farm to Robbie Burns. Robbie Burns not so much into the farming. So over the course of his life, he flipped back and forth between farming and then, going into Edinburgh and the cities and trying to make a name for himself as a poet. But then he would go back and do the farming thing and take care of the kids and then go back to the city, and it was a lot of back and forth. A lot of his poems have to do with love and women and love and ladies and women. It was basically a ladies' man. He was a bit of a player, that Robbie Burns. He had all kinds of ladies in his life. He started out with this one woman. That was how he started writing poetry, I guess, was he started writing about this one woman, but she just kept rejecting him. Then he knocked up one of the household servants and she had his first child. But while she was having his first child, he was already in another relationship with this other woman who had twins like a little bit after the first child was born. That would be scandalous now. If there was some famous singer who knocked up the servant and like the housekeeper and then his girlfriend had twins like a little bit late, like that, that'd be pretty scandalous now. You can imagine in the late 1700s what that would have been like. And then he went and fell in love with this other one and was gonna go to Jamaica with her. And in order to raise the funds to go to Jamaica, he published a book of his poetry that said something like poems chiefly in Scottish dialect or something like this. This is his first published work. And that's how he raised the money. But then because he became kind of pseudo-famous for this book, he decided not to go to Jamaica because here are now all these people respect him and love his poetry and blah, blah, blah. He leaves that one behind, goes back to the mother of the twins in the farm. There was a lot of this in his life, is what I'm saying. He also had another kid by a third baby mama. There might have been even 4 baby mamas in the end. Lots of baby mamas. Basically, bit of a ladies' man, but also a lover of love. And apparently, also a big supporter of women's rights, which, again, in the late 1700s, not so big at the time, not so popular, not a popular opinion, ladies' rights. So he was just a lover of women and all things women. And then he died at the age of 37. Even back then, that's pretty young. But one of the things that made him so famous was he did a lot for Scottish dialect and a lot for the common man back in those days because he wasn't a rich man, didn't come from money. He just wrote all these poems about love and women, and he loved the women, and that is how it all came to be. So what he's famous for, he's written all kinds of poems like A Fond Kiss and A Red, Red Rose and all these kinds of things. Several of his poems inspired really popular 20th century works of Mice and Men. The title of Mice and Men, John Steinbeck book, came from a line in a Robbie Burns poem. Catcher in the Rye is all centered around a Robbie Burns poem and the guy misunderstanding the lyrics of the poem. And even Bob Dylan songs have been inspired by Robbie Burns poems. The most popular of all the Robbie Burns things, though, would be he wrote the poem Auld Lang Syne, which, of course, now is a song that everybody sings on New Year's Eve, and it's a big thing. So that was his sort of like claim to fame. And he was also voted in 2010, I believe, voted to be the greatest Scot of all time by the Scottish media. So there you go. Good guy to know. So the Burns night started, I think, about 5 years after he died. A bunch of his friends got together at his old house called Burns Cottage on his birthday on January 25th, 5 years after he died. They thought, really miss that Bobby Burns. Really miss him, his liveliness and always bringing a different lady to the party. So they got together and they decided to recite some of his poems and drink some whiskey and eat some haggis and sort of just commemorate the life and times of Robert Burns. They decided to do this every year on his birthday, January 25th. And eventually more and more people were invited. It became a big to-do, a big affair, and now it's celebrated all over the world. Apparently he's really big in Russia. They even had a stamp with his face on it, I guess. So modern day Burns nights, it's always held on January 25th or the nearest weekend to it. The Burns night that I go to is held on the 25th, no matter what day of the week it falls on, but a lot of Burns clubs or Scottish societies will just have it on the Saturday preceding the 25th. So this year, for instance, would be on the 23rd. I'm actually going to two this year, one on the 23rd and one on the 25th. So I'll get a little double Burns celebration. But basically, people dress up. The haggis is piped in on a big sort of tray, a wooden tray thing held up by a bunch of different people. It's almost like pallbearers for the haggis, kind of like walking in with the coffin, whatever. It's usually piped into the room by a bagpiper, and shots of whiskey are consumed. And somebody gets up and does the address to the haggis, which is a Robbie Burns thing. And it's all written in this old Scottish dialect, so it's kind of hard to understand. It's a million miles long, so I'm not going to recite it here, but basically it talks about the beast that was the haggis and the something. And if you don't know what haggis is, I suggest you go look it up, because that's an entirely other video, and I'm not going to get into the ingredients of haggis at this point. It's sort of spicy meat, ground meat situation. It's not for everyone. But it is sort of a delicacy in the Scottish world. So that is served with neeps and tatties. Neeps and tatties are turnips and potatoes. That's usually, in this day and age, the side dish. And there's usually a main meal, like a roast beef or a turkey or a salmon or a something as your main dish. And then you have the haggis as one of the courses of the whole evening. People get up, they recite Burns poems. A man usually stands up and does a toast to the lassies, and then a woman usually stands up and does a toast to the laddies, or a reply, like a rebuttal to whatever the toast to the lassies were. But there usually is a lot of laughs, and it's a good time, and some drinks are had, and even if you know nothing about Burns, it's a fun night out. Afterwards, there's usually some Celtic music, and there's usually either some Scottish country dancing, or some, in Nova Scotia, a lot of square sets, Cape Breton style square sets happen. It's just a fun time, and you get to dress up, and men get to put their kilts on, and whatever. So that leads me to the burning question that I'm sure you all have. What does one wear at these sorts of things? If you're looking for the traditional, what people would wear, men would wear kilts, and the whole kind of sort of semi-formal to formal getup that goes along with that. Your Argyle jacket, or your Prince Charlie, a shirt, a bow tie, or a tie, or a vest, or, any kind of combination of those things. Some men don't like to wear kilts. Some men are not kilt men. They often wear a tartan tie, maybe a tartan pocket square, tartan vest, something along those lines. And for women, it's a little bit more up in the air. A lot of women end up wearing the tartan sash. Of course, in my world, we wear a lot more sort of modern sort of stuff. That is what I do for a living. I make modern tartan clothing. So it could be any number of tartan things. You certainly don't have to wear tartan, but it is kind of nice to be able to sport a little something. Just know that if you show up in some sort of floral gown, you might look just a little out of place. It is usually a semi-formal to a formal event, so it's not really a jeans and t-shirt kind of place. It is kind of like a little bit more dressy. But again, there are no police for this sort of thing, so it's really up to yourself, whatever you feel comfortable in. If you're not going to a Burns night, or you just rather celebrate it at your local pub, maybe just lift a wee dram of scotch into the air, And cheers to Robbie Burns on the 25th of January. And we can all celebrate together this man who did quite a bit for, you know, sort of the common Scottish man. And really, how many, you know, sort of poets or writers or musicians or songwriters or actors are we still going to be celebrating 250 years from now? So happy early Burns Day. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, and I will see you next Friday. Cheers.